I didn't hear anything. Not the recognizable kind of silence, but the type of stillness that seeps through every crack like rainwater under a door. That Monday morning, I stared at the screen and realized I had disappeared from the very things I'd built over nearly 2 decades. They took 3 minutes to fire me, but only 48 hours later, 9 investors withdrew all their capital. No one could imagine what I still held in my hands. My name is Anita Vo. At 47. I had spent the last 18 years of my life as the Vice President of Strategy and Investment at Nexora Dynamics, a telecommunications technology company headquartered in Singapore. During those years, I built an investment network and developed products that generated more than $1.5 billion in annual revenue. I opened Southeast Asian markets, shaped our core product Nexora Grid, and personally brought in 6 out of our 9 major investors. The orchid on my desk was wilting when I first noticed something was wrong. I had watered it that morning, but its petals drooped as if sensing what I couldn't yet see. My calendar notification pinged, a reminder for the meeting about our Series E funding round. Except there was no meeting on my calendar. I refreshed the screen, clicked through different views, but found nothing. With practiced keystrokes, I accessed the shared calendar system. There it was, a 3-hour block marked Series E Strategy Session with a small padlock icon indicating it was set to private. My name wasn't on the attendee list. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in protest. The Singapore skyline stretched out beyond my office windows, hazy with morning humidity. 18 years. I'd watched that skyline transform as our company grew from a small startup with 15 employees to a regional tech giant employing over 800 people across 7 countries. My phone buzzed. A message from Min, a young analyst I had mentored from his internship days. Meeting with new investment board. You're not there. I felt my stomach tighten. Min had always been loyal, brilliantly so. He had a way of noticing things others missed, which is why I had fought to keep him when HR wanted to end his internship early due to budget constraints. That was 4 years ago. Now he was sending me warning signals from inside a meeting I should have been leading. What's the focus? I texted back. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Min was being careful about what to say. Finally. Julian is presenting your expansion framework, complete with your slides. Julian Trin, my protege. The man I had personally recommended for promotion to Director of Business Development just 8 months ago. He had talent, raw and unrefined, but promising. I had seen myself in him, the hunger, the strategic mind, the ability to see connections others missed. I had mentored him, opened doors, included him in meetings with investors that someone at his level would never normally attend. I closed my eyes briefly. When I opened them, another message had appeared. They're discussing restructuring the leadership team. The morning light suddenly felt too harsh. I stood up, my movements deliberate and controlled as I walked to the window. Below, morning traffic crawled along North Bridge Road. People hurried along sidewalks, umbrellas at the ready for Singapore's unpredictable rain. Life continuing as normal while mine tilted on its axis. My office phone rang, the sound sharp in the quiet room. The display showed a number from HR. Anita Vo, I answered, my voice steady. Ms. Vo, could you come to the Phoenix conference room? Mr. Jing and Ms. Lim from HR would like to speak with you. The voice belonged to Priya, our HR coordinator. Regarding? I asked, a brief hesitation. They'll explain when you arrive. I'll be there in 5 minutes, I said, and hung up. I looked around my office, the space I had occupied for over a decade, the wall of awards and recognitions. The framed photo of our team at the Technology Leadership Awards 3 years ago, when Nexora Grid won Innovation of the Year. The vintage Motorola StarTAC phone I kept as a reminder of how far technology had evolved. I picked up my tablet and phone, slipped them into my bag, and left my office without looking back. The Phoenix conference room was the smallest of our meeting spaces, tucked away in a corner of the executive floor. As I approached, I saw Julian standing outside, hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. When he saw me, he straightened, his expression carefully neutral. "Anita," he said with a nod. "Julian." I stopped in front of him. "Interesting that you're here for an HR meeting concerning me." A flicker of something, guilt, triumph, crossed his face. "I was asked to attend." "I'm sure you were," I replied, then pushed open the door without waiting for him to respond. Inside, Devon Zheng, our chief operating officer, sat alongside Mei Lim from HR. A third person, a young woman I didn't recognize, sat in the corner with a laptop open in front of her. "Anita, please take a seat," Devon said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I remained standing. "I'd prefer to understand what this is about first." Devon and May exchanged glances. Julian entered behind me and closed the door. "We've been reviewing the organizational structure," Devon began, his voice professionally detached. "As part of our preparation for the Series E funding, we've identified several areas for efficiency improvements." "Efficiency improvements," I repeated. The corporate euphemism tasted bitter on my tongue. "Yes." Devon cleared his throat. "We've decided to restructure the strategy and investment division. Your position is affected." The room seemed to grow very still. I looked at each face in turn. Devon's practiced neutrality, May's slight discomfort, Julian's carefully controlled expression, the unknown woman's studied focus on her laptop. "Affected how?" I asked, though I already knew. May spoke now, her voice gentle but firm. "We're terminating your employment, effective, immediately." 3 minutes. That's all it took. Devon spoke of restructuring needs, of changing market demands, of strategic pivots. May outlined severance details, benefit continuation, return of company property. The woman in the corner typed quietly, documenting everything. And Julian? Julian stood slightly behind Devon, saying nothing, his eyes never quite meeting mine. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I didn't demand explanations or threaten legal action. I simply stood there, feeling a peculiar numbness spreading through my body, as if I were observing the scene from a distance. When they finished speaking, I asked only one question. Who authorized this decision? Devon shifted in his chair. It was a board-level decision, based on recommendations from the executive team. "I see," I said, though I didn't. "Not yet." "Is there anything else?" There wasn't. May handed me a folder containing documents I would need to sign and return. She explained that someone from HR would accompany me to clear out my office. "That won't be necessary," I said. "I can pack my personal items myself." "Company policy," May replied apologetically. I nodded once, turned, and walked out. Julian stepped aside to let me pass. I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "I assume you'll be taking over my position?" His expression revealed nothing. "The restructuring details will be announced later this week." "Of course," I replied. "Best of luck, Julian. I hope you remember what I taught you about loyalty." I walked out, my head high, my steps measured. The corridor seemed longer than usual, the lighting too bright. Employees glanced up as I passed, then quickly looked away, sensing something was wrong. News traveled fast in corporate corridors. Back in my office, a young HR assistant named Kamal waited nervously. He handed me a cardboard box. "For your personal effects," he said apologetically. I thanked him and began the strange ritual of dismantling 18 years of professional life. The photos went into the box. The awards remained. They belonged to the company. My notebooks, a few books. The small jade elephant my mother had given me for luck when I first joined Nexora. As I worked, I noticed a group gathering in the large conference room across the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see Julian at the front, gesturing to slides projected on the screen. I paused, squinting to see better. Those were my slides. My presentation on Trust, the Core of Growth, which I had developed for our investor pitch next month. But the company logo in the corner had been removed, and my name was gone from the footer. I felt a surge of heat rise to my face. 18 years of work, of innovation, of relationship building, and it had taken them less than an hour to begin erasing me. Kamal cleared his throat nervously. Ms. Vo, is there anything else you need help with? I turned to him, forcing my expression to remain neutral. No, thank you, I'm almost finished. He nodded, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. Kamal, I said, how long have you worked at Nixora? Just over a year, ma'am. Do you enjoy it here? He hesitated. Yes, ma'am, it's a good company. I looked at him, young, eager, probably just grateful to have a job at a prestigious tech firm. Remember something, Kamal. Companies aren't good or bad. People make them what they are. Watch who you trust. His eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. 10 minutes later, I walked out of Nixora Dynamics carrying a single box. 18 years reduced to the contents of a cardboard container. No goodbyes, no acknowledgements of my contributions, no well wishes for my future. Just silence and averted gazes. In the elevator down to the lobby, I stood alone, watching the floor numbers decrease. My reflection in the polished metal doors showed a woman I barely recognized, composed, expressionless, holding a box of discarded memories. The security guard in the lobby, Mr. Tan, looked up in surprise as I approached the exit at 10:30 in the morning. Heading out early, Ms. Vo? He asked. I managed a smile. Yes, Mr. Tan. Earlier than expected. His eyes flickered to the box in my arms, understanding dawning on his face. He had seen this scene play out before with others. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Thank you. I paused. You've always been kind, Mr. Tan. I appreciate that. He straightened, offering me a small bow of respect. It has been an honor, Ms. Vo. They are making a mistake. In that moment, his simple acknowledgement meant more than any corporate award I'd ever received. Outside, the Singapore heat hit me like a physical force. I stood on the sidewalk, suddenly uncertain where to go. For 18 years, my days had been structured around Nixora. Now, at 10:35 on a Monday morning, I had nowhere to be. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver my home address. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the gleaming tower that housed Nixora Dynamics. Instead, I looked forward, watching the city that had been my home for nearly 2 decades slide past the window. My apartment was silent when I entered, the air conditioning humming softly. I set the box down on my dining table and stood there, suddenly adrift. The numbness that had carried me through the morning began to recede, replaced by something sharper. Not grief, not yet. Anger, perhaps. Confusion, certainly. But mostly, a cold, calculating clarity. They had made a mistake. I just needed to figure out what it was and how to use it. I opened my laptop and tried to access the Nixora system. My credentials were already invalidated, efficient work by IT. But as I navigated through login screens, muscle memory took over. And I found myself typing an alternate set of credentials 2 years ago during a system migration. I had created an emergency administrator account. It wasn't standard procedure, but we had experienced a catastrophic server failure during a previous update, and I had insisted on having a backup access point that wasn't tied to the main authentication system. Only 3 people knew about it. Myself, our chief technology officer, who had since left the company, and Ming, our senior system architect. I held my breath as I entered the credentials. The screen flickered, and then I was in. I still had root-level access to Nixora Grid. For a moment, I sat perfectly still, processing the implications. They had removed my official access, erased my name from presentations, and escorted me from the building. But they had forgotten about the emergency system I had created. I navigated carefully through the file structure, noting what I could and couldn't access. Most of the current business files were unavailable. They were stored on systems I no longer had privileges to view. but the core Nexora grid architecture was fully accessible, along with all historical documentation related to its development, including the original intellectual property agreements. I pulled up the legal files, scanning quickly through digital contracts and agreements dating back to the company's founding. And there it was, the original IP assignment for Nexora Grid version 2.8, which I had co-developed with our technical team. According to the document, I was still listed as co-owner of the intellectual property rights for that version. And while the system had evolved to version 5.4, the core architecture, the foundation upon which everything else was built, remained based on that original 2.8 framework. More importantly, there was no record of any IP rights transfer following my termination. In their haste to remove me, they had overlooked a critical detail. I still legally owned part of the technology that powered their entire operation. I sat back, a small, cold smile forming on my lips. I didn't want to destroy what I had helped build, but I wouldn't let them erase me so easily either. My phone rang, startling me. The caller ID showed a Tokyo number that I recognized immediately. Saito Renji, senior partner at Tenzai Capital, one of our largest investors. I took a deep breath and answered. Mr. Saito, what a pleasant surprise. Ms. Vo. His voice was formal, controlled. I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all. How may I help you? A brief pause. I received an unusual email from Nexora this morning. It stated that you have voluntarily resigned from your position. Is this correct? I closed my eyes. So that was the narrative they were spinning. No, Mr. Saito, that is not correct. I was informed this morning that my position has been eliminated as part of a restructuring. My employment was terminated effective immediately. Silence on the line. Then, I see. This is concerning. May I ask why? Another pause. Ms. Vo, you are aware that Tenzai's investment in Nexora was predicated largely on the strength of its leadership team, particularly on your expertise and network. I'm flattered by your confidence, Mr. Saito. It is not flattery. Ms. Vo, it is business. His tone sharpened slightly. According to Clause 9.2 of our investment agreement, if any key architect personnel are replaced without proper notification and transition, we reserve the right to withdraw our capital. I hadn't known about that specific clause. I wasn't privy to all the final legal details of the investment agreements. But I wasn't surprised. Saito was always meticulous about protecting his investments. I see, I said carefully. And what do you intend to do with this information, Mr. Saito? That depends, he replied, on whether Nexora has been honest with its other investors, and on what you plan to do next. I haven't had much time to consider my next steps, I admitted. This morning's events were unexpected, understandable. His voice softened fractionally. Ms. Vo, Anita, we have worked together for 7 years. I value integrity above all else in business. Nexora's actions today suggest a concerning lack of it. I appreciate your call, Mr. Saito, I said, and your concern. It is not merely concern, Anita. It is due diligence. He paused. I will be contacting the other investors to discuss this development. In the meantime, I would advise you to review your legal options carefully. After we disconnected, I sat motionless, thoughts racing. Saito's call had opened up possibilities I hadn't yet considered. If Tenzai Capital withdrew its investment, others might follow. The Series E funding round, scheduled to close in less than a month, would collapse. My laptop pinged with an email notification. I clicked on it and found a message from Min, sent to my personal email rather than my now-defunct company account. A recording you should hear. The subject line read, attached was an audio file. I plugged in my headphones and clicked play. Julian's voice came through clearly. Completely voluntary. Anita decided it was time to pursue other opportunities. She didn't provide any transition documentation. but I've been working closely with her for the past year, so I'm familiar with all her projects and relationships. A voice I recognized as CEO Lawrence Chen's asked, "What about the Tenzai relationship?" Saito trusts Anita implicitly. "I've already scheduled a call with Saito for tomorrow," Julian replied smoothly. "I'll explain that while Anita laid the groundwork. I've been the one managing the day-to-day for months now. It's not entirely true, but he'll accept it once I walk him through our strategy." "And the Series E?" Lawrence again. "We'll proceed as planned. All the materials are ready, and I can handle the presentations. Anita's departure is unfortunate timing, but it won't affect our fundraising." Another voice, Devin Jung's. "What about her access to systems?" "It has already terminated all her credentials," Julian assured him. "Standard exit protocol. She has no access to anything sensitive." I stopped the recording, a cold anger settling in my chest. They weren't just erasing me, they were lying about me, claiming I had abandoned the company without proper handover, suggesting I had been disengaged for months. I checked the investor contact database through my emergency access. As I suspected, my name and email were still listed as the primary relationship manager for all 9 major investors. The system hadn't been updated to reflect Julian or anyone else in that role. Without conscious decision, I forwarded Min's recording to Saito Renji, adding only a brief note. "For your information, no action requested." Then I closed my laptop and went to make tea. My hands were steady as I heated water and measured loose tea leaves into my favorite porcelain pot, a gift from my grandmother before she passed. The familiar ritual calmed me, helping me think more clearly. By the time I poured my first cup, my phone was buzzing with notifications. I ignored it, sitting instead by my window, watching afternoon clouds gather over the city. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a typical Singapore storm brewing. When I finally checked my phone an hour later, I had missed calls from 3 different investors, along with emails requesting urgent conversations. I responded to none of them. This wasn't my storm to weather anymore. Instead, I called my lawyer, Priscilla Tan, and scheduled a meeting for the following morning. Then I unplugged my devices, changed into comfortable clothes, and did something I hadn't done on a Monday afternoon in 18 years. I took a nap. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, waking only when darkness had fallen and rain lashed against my windows. I made a simple dinner, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and began to plan my next steps. By morning, my strategy was clear. I showered, dressed in one of my most elegant suits, and headed to Priscilla's office in the central business district. The city looked different somehow, or perhaps I was seeing it differently. For nearly 2 decades, I had viewed Singapore through the lens of Nexora's interests. Now I was just Anita Vo again, unattached, unaffiliated, unexpectedly free. Priscilla greeted me warmly in her sleek, modern office overlooking the bay. "I was surprised to get your call," she said after we were seated with coffee. "You've been with Nexora for so long, I thought you'd retire there." "So did I replied, then explained the events of the previous day. Priscilla listened intently, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "They've made several mistakes," she said. "The most obvious being their misrepresentation of your departure to investors. But more importantly, there's the IP issue you discovered." I nodded. "I'm not interested in a prolonged legal battle. Priscilla, I want to move forward, not look back, but I need to protect myself and what I've built." "Understandable." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "Let me outline your options." For the next hour, we discussed potential approaches, from aggressive legal action to quiet negotiation. In the end, we settled on a strategy that felt right. I would formally notify Nexora of my continued IP ownership, request proper compensation for its use, and make it clear that I had no intention of disrupting their operations as long as they acknowledged my contributions appropriately. "And if they refuse?" Priscilla asked. I smiled. "They won't. By now, they're dealing with far bigger problems than me." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I opened it to find a financial news headline. Tenzai Capital freezes investment in Nexora Dynamics, cites leadership concerns. I showed it to Priscilla, who raised an eyebrow. You're doing? Not directly, I said, but I may have provided some relevant information. Throughout that day, I watched from a distance as the situation at Nexora unraveled. By noon, 2 more investors had publicly announced they were reviewing their positions. By mid-afternoon, rumors of an internal investigation were circulating on financial news sites. The company's stock, which had been steadily climbing in anticipation of the Series E funding, dropped 12% before trading closed. I received no calls from Nexora, no attempts at reconciliation or explanation. Their silence spoke volumes about their strategy. They were hoping to weather the storm without acknowledging their mistake. But the storm was just beginning. By the following morning, 6 of the 9 major investors had frozen their funding, demanding an independent audit of the company's leadership transitions and intellectual property holdings. The stock dropped another 8%. Financial analysts were speculating about the future of the Series E round. Technology blogs were running stories about turmoil at Nexora, with anonymous sources hinting at deeper problems within the executive team. Through it all, I remained silent. I gave no interviews, made no public statements, shared no insider information beyond what was legally mine to share. I simply watched as the consequences of their actions unfolded. On Wednesday afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Celine Ong, senior partner at Viora Ventures, a venture capital firm known for backing innovative startups in the region. No pitch needed, the message read, "We want to invest in someone who knew when to stay silent. If you're ready to start again, we're here." I smiled at my screen. Celine and I had met at various industry events over the years, but we'd never worked together directly. Her reputation was impressive. She had an uncanny ability to spot not just promising technologies, but promising people. I composed a careful reply. I don't have a name yet. Just a vision. But this time, I'm building something that can't be so easily taken away. Her response came within minutes. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to hear. Dinner tomorrow. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Singapore skyline in shades of gold and pink, I finally felt the numbness of the past few days giving way to something else. Not grief or anger, but a curious sense of liberation. For 18 years, I had poured myself into Nexora Dynamics. I had sacrificed weekends and holidays, relationships, and personal goals. I had believed in what we were building, not just technology, but trust. Networks of connection, infrastructure for the future. Now I understood that while I had been building networks outward, I had neglected to secure my foundation. My phone buzzed with a text from Min. 9 investors now, all frozen, board emergency meeting tomorrow. I texted back a simple, "Thank you," then added, "Be careful." His reply came quickly. Always. But some things matter more than caution. I smiled, remembering myself at his age, idealistic, principled, unwilling to accept the status quo when it seemed wrong. I had hired him because I saw that fire in him. Now he was risking his position to do what he believed was right. The next morning, I met with Celine Ong at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. She was exactly as I remembered, sharp, direct, with a quick smile that never quite reached her calculating eyes. "So," she said after we had ordered, "tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking that trust is more valuable than technology," I replied, "and that the best innovations come from understanding human connections, not just digital ones." She nodded, waiting for me to continue. Nexora Grid was successful because it created infrastructure that allowed for secure, reliable communication across diverse systems, I explained. But the next frontier isn't about connecting systems, it's about connecting trust. Go on. For the next hour, I outlined my vision for a new kind of platform, one that would allow businesses to build verifiable trust networks, to track and verify commitments and follow through, to create reputation systems that couldn't be manipulated by marketing or PR. Celine listened intently, asking occasional questions that pushed me to clarify or expand my thinking. When I finished, she sat back, studying me with those calculating eyes. "You're not just reacting to what happened at Nixora," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I agreed. "I've been thinking about this for years. What happened this week just clarified the need." She nodded slowly. "How much do you need to get started?" "5 million for the first 18 months, another 10 if we hit our development milestones." She didn't blink at the numbers. "And your team?" "I have a few people in mind," I said, thinking of Min and several others at Nexora who might be ready for something new. "But I want to be careful about how we approach them." "Of course." She reached for her glass of water. "We can have the initial funding transferred by the end of next week. I'll want to see a formal business plan and development roadmap before then, but I don't anticipate any issues." Just like that, my next chapter was beginning. No lengthy pitch meetings, no rounds of presentations to skeptical investors. Just a conversation between two women who recognize value in each other's vision and experience. As we finished our meal, Celine asked one final question. "What will you call it, your new company?" I hadn't settled on a name yet, but in that moment, one came to me. "Verita," I said. "From the Latin for truth." She smiled, a real smile this time, reaching her eyes. "Perfect." As I left the restaurant, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline read, "Nexora Dynamics CEO and COO step down amid investor concerns." I put my phone away without reading further. Their story wasn't mine anymore. I had a new one to write. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, Lawrence Chen's voice came through. "Anita," he said, sounding tired. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He sighed heavily. "Things got out of hand. The board has asked for my resignation, along with Devin's. Julian has been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." I said nothing, waiting. "The investors are demanding reassurance about the company's stability and leadership," he continued. "They've specifically asked about your status and the circumstances of your departure." Still, I waited. "The board would like to discuss your return to Nexora," he finally said, "in an expanded role, with direct reporting to them." I closed my eyes, absorbing the irony of the moment. 3 days ago, they had discarded me without hesitation. Now they wanted me back to save what they had put at risk. "I appreciate the offer, Lawrence," I said carefully. "But I've already made other arrangements. Anita, please. The company needs you. We built this together. Remember?" The "we" stung more than he could know. For years, I had believed in that collective identity, had sacrificed for it, had taken pride in it. Now I understood how easily "we" could become "they" when convenient. "I remember everything, Lawrence," I said, "including Monday morning. Please have your legal team contact Priscilla Tan regarding the intellectual property issues we need to resolve. Beyond that, I wish you and Nixora all the best." I ended the call before he could respond, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. There was no joy in watching something I had helped build struggle. But there was a certain justice in having my value finally recognized, even if it came too late. Later that evening, as I worked on the business plan for Verita, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Min stood there, looking nervous but determined. "I hope it's okay that I came by," he said. "I wanted to talk to you in person." I invited him in, offering tea which he accepted gratefully. "I resigned today," he said without preamble, cradling the teacup in his hands. After the board announcement, I nodded, not entirely surprised. "That was a brave decision." He shrugged. "Not really. I couldn't stay after seeing how they treated you. It wasn't right." His moral clarity was refreshing in an industry often dominated by pragmatism and opportunism. "What will you do now?" I asked. He hesitated, then met my gaze directly. "Actually, I was hoping I might be able to work with you. Whatever you're doing next, I want to be part of it." I smiled. I'm starting something new. It's called Verita. We're going to build trust networks for businesses. His eyes lit up. That sounds revolutionary. It might be, I agreed. It will certainly be challenging, and I'd be honored to have you join me. We spent the next few hours discussing the concept, with Min offering technical insights and asking questions that helped refine my thinking. By the time he left, the outline for Verita was stronger, more focused, and we had the beginnings of an implementation plan. Over the following days, news about Nexora continued to dominate business headlines in Singapore. The stock had stabilized somewhat after the leadership changes, but the company's reputation had taken a significant hit. The Series E funding round was officially postponed, with no new date announced. Meanwhile, I finalized my agreement with Viora Ventures, secured office space in a newly developed tech hub on the east side of the city, and began quietly recruiting key personnel, not just from Nexora, but from across the industry. 1 week after my termination, I posted a single update on LinkedIn. I am the one who built trust. Now you ask why it disappeared. The post went viral within the tech community, generating thousands of reactions and comments. I didn't respond to any of them, nor did I give interviews to the journalists who reached out. The statement stood on its own, a simple truth amid the corporate spin and financial speculation. 2 weeks later, Verita officially launched with a small team of 12 people, modest offices, and a clear mission: to create technology that made trust verifiable, trackable, and valuable. Saito Renji was among our first clients, bringing not just Tensai Capital's business, but also making introductions to other potential customers across Asia. Trust, he told me during our first meeting as client and provider, is Japan's most valued currency. What you are building speaks to our core values. 6 months later, as I stood at the window of Verita's expanded offices, watching a new generation of employees work on systems that would transform how businesses built and maintained trust, I reflected on that Monday morning that had changed everything. They had taken 3 minutes to fire me, but the consequences of that decision continued to ripple outward. Nexora was still operating, but diminished. They had eventually secured their funding, but at much less favorable terms, and their market position had slipped significantly. Julian had left the company, moving to a smaller competitor where, I heard, he was struggling to replicate the network he had thought was his at Nexora. Devon and Lawrence had both taken early retirement, their reputations tarnished by the very public breakdown of investor trust. And I had built something new. Something that couldn't be taken away because it wasn't built on corporate hierarchies or technological innovations alone, but on a principle that I had always valued. Trust must be earned, verified, and maintained, not just claimed. My phone buzzed with a message from Celine. Series A oversubscribed, investors fighting to get in. Congratulations. I smiled and typed back, trust pays dividends. Outside my window, Singapore's skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun, the same view I had seen for years from my office at Nexora, but now transformed by a new perspective. The buildings hadn't changed, but I had. They had silenced me for a moment, but in that silence, I had found a more powerful voice.